Now, if we want to aid data entry in some sheets, it's worth considering the VLookup formula to be helpful in data entry in some values that already exist in another file, for example. So here, if we use our VLookup file that's in your working folder, we have a simple example on the example sheet where our table we wish to complete is this one here on the left. And we're going to do that by entering the ID of a person, for example, 4, and then asking our lookup formulas to then populate the name and the age based on the ID number 4 by going across to the lookup table over here, coming down the first column, finding a match for our ID 4, and then returning the name John into here and 76 into here. So our first step is a formula here that will take this ID number, go to my lookup table, and return me with the name. The starting point is, as always, with formulas, an equal sign, followed by the correct formula, which is VLookup. As usual, Excel helps me out, telling me what parameters are required. The first of which is the lookup value. Well, that's the ID number in this column next to us here that I can't quite click on, which would be the normal option for picking that cell up, because it's so adjacent that we're in editing A4 that I can't click on B4. So I have to revert to the old-fashioned typing, comma. So my lookup value is contained in B4. Then I'm asked for the table array. Well, that's the reference for the lookup table. Now that is over here, so I can see it, so I can highlight it. Reference is the table, comma. Now there are better ways of referencing tables in VLookup formulas, and that's to use named ranges that we've already seen in action, but we will come to that in our second example. So I've selected the table array, then comma. Call index num is the posh long term for which numbered column do you wish to bring back. Now each of the columns within our table, so that's totally regardless of which columns they fall into within Excel, are numbered 1, 2 and 3. You always use 1 for the lookup column, so it will always take the value you've got and try and find a match in column 1, and then you can return any one of the other columns. So I want column 2 in this case to get their name, so I simply put a 2 in the formula, then comma, and then the last part is simply either a true or a false. A false meaning that you're looking for an exact match for the value that you're looking up. True is for a nearest match. Well, we need an exact match, otherwise we're not going to get the right person. That's false. And that completes my VLookup, so I can close the formula with its bracket and return, and as if by magic, John then appears in the name. Let's just centerline that ID. And then in the second line, I can go do a 3, then perhaps a couple more 4s, 5, 5, 5, an 8, 10, an 8, a 3, a 2, a 1, and a 7. So those are the IDs. Let's centerline those. We know that we can take formulas in Excel and replicate them down and everything will stay relative. Just before we do that though, let's just revisit this formula. I do want the B4 to change as I replicate this formula downwards, but I don't want the table reference to change, so I need to make sure that I fix that with my F4 keyboard shortcut, and that sticks dollars around the start and the end of the range, so the table is now fixed. So that when I replicate this formula down to the bottom, I get all the correct names for the correct ID. I get an NA 58, because by accident I typed both numbers in. But if I return that to an 8, I get Jen. So I can see that each of these numbers therefore match the right person in the lookup table. I could do the same for the age. So it equals the lookup, open brackets. The lookup value is still the ID cell. Table is this table here. I would like to dollar up at this stage because I know I need it to be fixed, comma. This time I want to bring back column 3, so that's the third column within our lookup table, but I still need it to be an exact match, so that's false. And then I can replicate this formula to the bottom and see that it brings back everyone's correct age. So Guy, ID 10, 10 Guy 28, it puts 28 in there. We can just format central lines so they look neat. So that's the VLookup formula, vertical lookup. Vertical because the table that we're looking up in, this one here, is stored vertically and we want it to look down the first column. We will look at the VLookup, which asks it to look along the first row as opposed to the first column. But in this case, it's the first column. Out of the two, this is the most used VLookup. Now in our sales sheet, which is the next sheet along, we're asking to look up a little bit more information. We have some sales information. We have the sales date. Let's have July 6th, 2013. We made a sale of 45,000. To which client? Client number 6. And then I would like it to already complete the next 3 columns for me by taking the client ID into the client's sheet, looking for the correct ID and then returning the correct values. And we're going to make this slightly easier on ourselves by naming the client data. So if I click here and do Control A, that will select all the columns and all the rows. I can then give that named range a name, and having no imagination, I'm going to call it data. So that's now called data, which will make my lookup formula so much easier. Client name is equals VLookup. Lookup value is the client ID. The table is data. Now what you'll find is as you start typing, as well as it pulling up formulas that begin with your letters that you start typing, it pulls up named ranges, and there with a single D it spots data. I can double click to select that, comma. The only thing I don't know now is which column contains the client's name. And if I try to click through to that sheet, it will then pick up a reference to that sheet. So I need to effectively guess, but then I can go back and check. I think it's column 4, comma, must be an exact match still. So that's false. And we get Wallace, and my guess at column 4 was pretty close. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it was the 4th column. And the same for the town. Let's just check the column now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I can copy my formula across. It's actually looking at the wrong cell now because I didn't fix anything. So why don't we go back and do this properly by fixing the C2, only the column. So the column cannot change, which means that I can actually drag this formula vertically and it will move to the next row. And if I drag it horizontally, it will still look at C. So it's still looking at C, but I do need to change the column information, which is 8. And then the department, letter R, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Again, I can replicate across, so it's doing the correct lookup, but then change my 8 for an 18. Give me the sales department. These will now replicate downwards with ease because we've fixed the column but not the row. We have a named range, so that cannot change. If I were to simply enter a few more dates, let's do 9, 7, 13, and then be clever with those. So they come every other day. View sales values. And then a few clients. And then if I take these formulas, replicate downwards, they quite happily fill in correctly. So that's an introduction to the VLookup formula. Vertical lookup requires a cell value to be looked up in a table. Which column do you wish to bring back? And you want it to be an exact match or a near match. At the moment we've dealt with just exact matches, but we will look at near matches and how you can use them to then pull back a value within a table when you possibly have lots of values to look up.